Good evening. I'd like to call Special Services Committee meeting to order at 7:30. Item 1 on our agenda is the approval of the April 21st, 2022 Special Services
So
minutes.
moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 2 is our enrollment data. Dr. McDonald.
So the enrollment data, our enrollment has changed by 12 students since last month, which is pretty typical. You will see a big bubble on the grade 11, grade 12 at Spalding High School. And what happened was a lot of, they did a credit audit, and they thought that because the students had enough credits to become a 12th grader that they needed to change that in the system. So you'll see there was 34 students from the junior class that were down 34, and there was 22, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on, 29 that went up to the senior class. We actually need to fix that correction because the way that we report to the state is by cohort year. So they're actually still considered juniors. They would not be part of this year's. Even though they're graduating, they'll still be part of the graduating class as far as the state is concerned next year. So there actually really isn't that much of an enrollment difference. It was just a change in the back system that needs to be corrected.
Any questions? Okay, there being none. Item 3 is our bus data, which is in our backup.
So the buses remain consistent. The bus company is doing a phenomenal job just moving people around and making sure kids are getting to and from school. I can't even imagine being the transportation director. And the drivers are incredibly flexible. So I just, any chance that we have to be able to thank them, I think we need to take. This morning, the bus coordinator actually was here. We're meeting with Mrs. Perkins to begin setting up the routes for next year. It looks like at this point we'll have 17 buses at the high school, middle school, and 13 at the elementary level, and that does take into account the new kindergarten students that will be riding. And they're shifting some routes around. The Knights of Columbus stop will not be there. That will move to King Street, and they're splitting the School Street stop because there's so many kids that get on there, so they're going to divide that out. And then the bus routes, they'll continue to work on them, and they'll come forward to this committee for approval.
Mrs. Stokes.
Do you get reports when there's behavior issues on buses?
Every day.
Are you allowed to report that to us, or is that something that?
Confidential.
So
Record.
are you allowed to say whether they're like higher or lower than years past, or, so we're not allowed to know anything about it?
I mean, I can get you information on the number. Do we have the number of infractions? Do we track that?
I don't
I'm
expect
not
you to
really
know it
sure.
this month either.
She's the expert. We can look at that and see. I don't know if we track that or not. It depends on when it's input into the student information system, the principals input that, and it depends on what they code it as. So we can try to pull bus, but it depends on how it's coded.
And I think that's because one of our last meetings, I think it was the diversion programs, I was at a grocery store and somebody stopped me and said, have we looked into the infractions on the bus? And I was like, no, I don't believe we have. So, any kind of update to see?
Seeing more bus write-ups this year than I have the year that we didn't, go to school very often. But I have not seen more write-ups this year than I've seen in the past. It's pretty consistent, but I don't have an exact number that I can give you.
So I'm just going to request, if possible, if she's allowed to, if she could kind of report next month on
Yeah, we can try
the
to
infractions.
we
And
can
I
try
don't
to
want
get
you to
that.
do anything that's going to identify a child or anything.
Yeah,
so
no, like total number of.
total numbers, maybe look at what last year's numbers were, you know what I mean? I guess.
The biggest thing
yeah,
is for,
COVID.
and there was a video actually that the transportation director shared with us. It was a news clipping from, it was either Texas or Arizona, where a bus was hit from the side by a car, and it showed the impact on the inside. And so the biggest problem that we have, especially this time of year, every year, is kids are antsy. They don't want to sit down, and they get up, and just getting them to sit down. And everybody's patience is a little low at the end of the year, so drivers, you tend to get more. Joey wouldn't listen to me today, or Sally was standing up in her seat. That's usually the kind of infractions that we get.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And I get it if they're being antsy,
Mhm.
but again, there's a lot of
Other
areas out there where
major
buses are getting hit or whatever, and if
Yeah.
kids are you know what I mean, like any input that I think we could get. I don't want to leave them out when we're talking about behavior issues, so any
Absolutely.
kind of report on
Yeah,
that would be
I
great.
can definitely try to find something for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Downs?
Yeah, if something you can add that into your report each month, just don't need to know who, what bus, just at least how many infractions, and then we're on the bus. The other question is, you might have answered it, I might have missed it. Short on bus drivers still, or are we good?
You know, we had combined some routes this year. It's taking a long time to hire drivers. We actually talked about that today. So sometimes the transportation director has to drive. Sometimes she can be back at the base. It's every day is a challenge. So you probably get, or hear about the alerts where we say, bus, our 11 students are riding on R9, R4, and R13 today. So every day, Carrie, the transportation director, and Mrs. Perkins are working on, okay, how are we gonna get these kids here and here? So it is super, super challenging.
Now, what about athletics? Are we struggling there?
Right now, because we're not having, there was only 2 riders on the late bus, and I believe that the buses are running for athletics right now, is that correct? Yes.
Any other questions on bus data?
That's the bus expert right there. I am in awe.
All right, item 4 is our attendance data.
So this month, like last month, every school actually improved their attendance rate. They're small amounts, less than 1%, but it's still a small improvement. So, and we're not going down, which sometimes happens this time of year, so that's encouraging.
Any questions? Yeah.
Sorry. Last one, just kidding.
Okay.
Do you have a way to look at attendance data that kids that are absent from COVID, so we can look at those potential numbers?
I don't believe that they're coding, they code them like COVID related. So anything that's COVID related would be excused, so that wouldn't actually show on here.
Okay.
But excused absences could be for other reasons as well, not just because of COVID. So there's really, I don't think I have a way that I can show you that.
So, another question. So I guess my question is, we were talking about learning loss and we're opening it up to the entire district. I guess my question is, when we're looking at learning loss, should we be able to look at the numbers, and it sounds like we can't. Should we be looking at the numbers of absences due to COVID so we can look at what the potential learning loss would be?
You'll have an instructional presentation in June from each school. They'll share their instructional data and the achievement, and the principals actually, when they're looking at that data, they're looking for the reasons of why there's fluctuations, and I'm sure that they'll address that in their presentations for each school.
Can you kind of let them know that it was kind of asked? All right.
Yes, ma'am.
I hate asking them when they're there, because then it looks like they
Yeah.
feel like they have to go back.
And
but
I'm sure it's probably already on the top of their list anyway.
I just
Yeah.
think when we're talking about learning loss and opening it up, I think I don't think COVID's going away. So being able to track that, I think would be important to us, because when kids are out with COVID, they're out. And it's an excused absence, but if they're out due to a COVID protocol, but they feel better, and they can't come in our building, I think that's something that we're gonna have to talk about maybe in 5 years. Not saying change anything, but I'm saying that's something that I think we're gonna have to look at, because if kids can't be in the building, but they're still entitled to a free and appropriate public education, I think that at some committee level, and I don't know what committee that would be, I
It's
just thought
actually on
5
the
years.
list for instruction, which would be for Keith.
Yeah,
Just
so,
thought about it, I wrote it last week.
thank you.
All right, any others? Okay, item 5 is our special education update by Ms. Reinhardt.
Great, thank you. So everyone has my report in front of them. I'm just going to give some context for some numbers so they just make a little more sense for people. So I just wanted to start real quickly with that we currently have,
I don't have it.
It's in the backup.
it's in the back.
Oh, it's on the.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
sorry about that.
That's okay.
I thought it was a piece of paper.
It's
I
okay.
didn't bring my computer, so I have paper.
We currently have 852 students identified for in need of special education. And when you look at the start to the start of the school year to now, that seems like an increase. So I just wanted to provide context that does include new children found eligible. It also includes children that move into the district, children that are placed in the district through foster care, children that are identified through preschool, right, at the age of 3. So there are variables to that particular number. Which brings us to the preschool number at 97. It is very typical that school districts start very low with our preschool because of how kids have to enter preschool, and they enter on their 3rd birthday. So we tend to see these kind of ebbs and flows based upon when children typically have clusters of birthdays. So it's very typical that we end high and start low. So oftentimes at the start of the school year, school boards will say to me, can we kind of cut our preschool? And it's like, just wait, let's see how we end and get a couple years data, because we always end higher than we started off. Going down to the out-of-district students, this is kind of interesting. I had mentioned that this number was in transition. We have been very stable in terms of our schools placing students out of district. We've been able to access the Rochester Learning Academy, which again, we pay for. So it's a less restrictive placement, which is fantastic. It's in our community. Those students can access Spalding, they can access the middle school, which is really what we want for our students. Where we have seen a significant impact this year, and the numbers have changed since actually I wrote this, we now have 72 students out of district. 19 of them are at Rochester Learning Academy. But we've had 18 students in total placed by the court system, or DCYF, or behavioral health, which is really important because although we end up picking up a substantial cost for that, the school district doesn't place them out. They're not placed out because we couldn't provide them education in our schools. So I just want to make people aware that that seems to be the number that was really in the most flux this year for us. And it's still the case where we are still working to address our issue of the 402 payments and how we have perhaps a disagreement with the state in terms of what our obligations for paying are and how we prove that paperwork.
I'm not finding it in my backup.
It's there, it's after the attendance.
So I have page 1 through 10. Can you tell me which page it's on?
Yeah, sorry, page 10.
It's 10, 11, 12.
I only have 1 through 10.
If you look at the email they sent to us, I don't know if you're in the
Yeah, I
shared
didn't put it
drive.
on a drive,
I
I got
just
it
pulled
from
out
the email. Go to the email PDF attachment.
Sorry, I know,
No, that's okay.
I didn't even get a
Sorry,
chance to
Sandy.
pre-look at it because I was looking at the shared drive. Do we normally not put it, again, I don't mean to interrupt, do we normally not put it on the shared drive? Is it just,
I'm going to have to defer to, because I don't have a part of that, I just pass it off, so I'm going to defer to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I get it in the backup from the email, when they email the agendas, I use that.
It's right, it's in the agenda.
He's got it.
So what she's saying is when she referred to it as shared drive, so I guess the question we'll have to ask, whoever loads it, did they
If you
forget?
scroll.
yeah, can we just add it to, it's just easier for me if we add it to the shared drive.
It might just be this one off, so.
Sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That's
interrupt.
okay. We can add it, no worries.
Just a couple on page 2 to just highlight, we have been made aware that there are some potential move-ins who are currently in out-of-district placements. And so I just briefly described the process of what happens. There's been a lot of questions, what happens when a school district receives a child that might be in an out-of-district placement. But we are really working to make sure that they are residents of the Rochester School District before any action is taken. That's why I'm saying they're out there and we know about them, but once they are actually officially residents of the Rochester School District, we'll go from there. But that will be an impact on our numbers. But again, for clarity purposes, when we think that these numbers often reflect on our programming, I just want to be clear that if we do see a significant increase suddenly, that would be why. That we do know that those students may or may not be joining us.
Yes, so you assign them to a school district without them checking to see if they're a Rochester resident?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No, so what happens
I
is,
don't know what you're saying.
we have students who are placed in out-of-district placements in special ed day schools, right? And the school might have contacted us, or the other district might have contacted us saying, we think these children are living in Rochester, and we say, that's fantastic, here's where they register, here's what they
Okay.
need to do, call us back when they've done that.
Okay,
And then the school district might say, well, why don't you come join? Thank you very much, they are not ours, and we are not gonna muddy the water. We appreciate your time and your effort, but we spend our time and effort on our students who are residents of the Rochester School District.
okay.
And the last piece is really more for information. I know it's late and I can certainly kind of elaborate on this another day, but just so people have a quick reference point to 504 and special education, because we do hear those terms kind of tossed around a lot, and what they mean and how, just some kind of things to think about. A quick, literally the most simple compare and contrast. But the websites at the end did have some additional information if you were interested in, you could link to read, and I will tackle that more next year as we continue on with this format.
Thank you. And I'll get to.
You go ahead first.
Okay.
I'm fine
Mr.
with
Kadir.
this.
So, and I don't know if this is even a relevant question, but with St. Elizabeth Seton, I know the numbers are small, but with their closing, students from our community that now may be going to Dover, to continue that route of education, are we going to be looking at St. Mary's as opposed to St. Elizabeth Seton next year?
So that's a really good question. So the reason we have a responsibility for students that are serviced because they are identified in need of special education but placed in this private school, there's a very narrow parameter that we're required to service these students for. And it's not just Rochester students, it's all students who meet that parameter identified in need of special education and what the services are, given the amount of money we're required to allocate to that particular school. Because St. Elizabeth resides within our school district. Once it's gone, we have no obligation to those students unless they come back to our public schools because they're Rochester School District students. If as a parent I live in Rochester, but I'm gonna go to Portsmouth, I think it's Portsmouth Christian. Right. Portsmouth, if that child has a plan and is eligible under special ed, the Portsmouth School District will take part of its IDEA funding to provide a certain level of support for that child.
Okay, so it doesn't follow residency, it follows, okay,
Correct.
excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. The only thing I'm going to just add to that, though, that follows the residency is the evaluation. So the evaluation, Portsmouth can do the evaluation, but they invite us because it's our student, and we would typically want to get involved at that point.
Mrs. Stokes, and it is in the drive. I found it.
Well, it just gets sent to me. It wasn't in my, I swear it wasn't in my original drive. I was like 11 and 12, I only had 10. I know, I swear to God. So graduation is coming up, and we have a lot of IEP students, and I know there's a difference between like 18 and 21. Are you allowed to provide the information of what kind of diploma these students will be getting, or is that too small? I know, like a cohort. So for me, I'd be interested in finding out, and I don't need 504, but I'm looking for like IEP. Are they getting like a regular diploma, a potential state diploma, or 20 credit diploma,
Yeah, I wouldn't
or
be able-
like a certificate of attendance?
So there's been a lot of questions about diplomas this year, right? And having
Yeah.
been here since August 9th, I've had a really great learning curve on how we do diplomas in Rochester. But anything specific like that would really identify students. So I could say, oh, we have 2 children receiving certificates of attendance in the Rochester School District. I think we'd be able to figure out who those 2 children are. We are not that big. So any kind of specific information like that, I wouldn't be able to provide. I can say that we have, and Sandy, I'm going to have you jump in if I misspeak, we have 3 options available to students, right? We have the Rochester diploma,
Yep.
we have the state 20 credit diploma, and we have the certificate of attendance.
Correct.
In terms of whether a student who's identified with special ed, in terms of which one they access, that is a decision of the IEP team, based upon the child's needs, any transition services they might need, and any other outstanding factors that we would consider.
Correct. I guess my question is, I attended a meeting and there was a discussion based about like special education coming in from the 8th grade, going to the 9th grade and kind of determining it then, and then having the discussion, it's a statewide issue, but having that determination be coming into 9th grade and automatically just kind of be slated for a certificate of attendance. So I was just curious if we had any data.
I think the high school looks, and this might be inaccurate, but previously they looked after 10th grade. And that's when, so I don't know if that's
As a
happening.
parent of a child with a disability, I
So
know it
we
was
have to-
slated coming into 9th,
Well,
but maybe
because
that has changed.
it's less that they're coming into 9th, it's that when a child turns, by the time the child turns 14, so in whatever IEP that covers that birthday, by the time a child turns 14, the IEP team has to start having a conversation about transitionary services. And what that means is, okay, what do we think the child's gonna get for a diploma, which is why the high school probably starts looking at tracking more at grade 10, because for all kids, that's when we start going, ooh, I might need more time, I might need less time. So some kids we know very clearly, right, that, oh, we think they're gonna need 5 years to graduate from high school. We think they might need longer till age 21 when they age out and we have that certificate of attendance. But the team will look at that, and just because the team has made a decision does not mean that the IEP team can't go back and reconsider that if it falls within the parameters, or there are other outstanding factors, changes to the child that have happened. And so that's why we start, but that process is guided. We have a series of questions that we have to ask and have answered from the child's perspective. We have to think about the courses they need to take. That will adjust based upon what their needs are. If they're a child that has some perhaps more complicated learning issues, like my child is hearing impaired, so when she does her transitionary services, there will be some access for adult supports for her as part of that, learning how to access your environment when you're hearing impaired, because she's significantly hearing impaired enough. So that's just part and parcel of the IEP process.
Okay.
Anything else for Ms. Reinhardt? All right, thank you so much for your report. Oh, did you
I
have
have
questions?
questions on the attendance data.
That's back on item 4. We're on item 5. Do you want to go back?
So should I take Sandy out in the hall and talk with her and like you guys
You
did
can
and
give
have
me-
that
if-
conversation?
if
Or can
you
we do
want-
it now?
If you want to call me, we can, or you can come in and we can go over all of it. if you'd like.
I'm just concerned, I don't know if any of you look at this data, but I'm concerned that you've got 69 kids missing from September to now in elementary schools. You got 100 and some odd kids missing at the high school from September to now. How do we track that? Do we track that? Do we
Yes.
try to contact the parents? Do we find out what's going on? Why are those kids missing?
They're not missing, they've moved, or they've transferred to a private school. We have to report out.
100 kids missed
Yes.
out of our high school
Yes,
transfer?
we have approximately 250 kids each year that move.
Wow.
New Hampshire is a very transient population.
In and out.
Okay, I got one other question, if I might, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
And that is, what do you mean unexcused? I know what unexcused means, but what does unexcused absence mean?
So
On the
we
charts.
actually have an attendance policy, and so this year and last year, anything that's medically COVID, that could be COVID related would be excused, meaning that we don't count that as an absence for the student, and there's not a mark on their record that they weren't here that day. We know that they weren't here, it's marked as an excused absence. An unexcused absence is if they don't show up, they
They don't
go
have
on
to put the doctor's
vacation.
note in with the next day or
Parents
something?
don't call them.
Is that?
That used to be for excused, that used to be the only way you could get excused. Now it can be the doctor's note or COVID related. We don't require a note for every COVID related,
Okay.
but yes, that is typically the practice.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, item 6 is 5-year plan. That's at a standstill for right now. Item 7, public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address the committee? Okay, I'll close public comment. Item 8 is other. Does anyone have anything for other for special services? Okay, may I have a motion?
Motion.
to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?